Right, hello, welcome to the Sisyphus Complex Solution. This is episode 193 and it's called Yellow Submarine. In case anybody does actually wonder, no, the yellow part doesn't refer to the colour of our submarines, but I'm sure you'll have guessed that, or you certainly will as we go through into the next part of the audit process within the MOD, which this week is looking at the Submarine Delivery Agency. As per usual, get started with looking at the numbers first. And the benchmark period of 2019 to 2020, that shows the total taxpayer burden even of 121.5 million. That's basically the rounded down headline figure that I've got there. It's got an average salary of 71k, cost of employment at 60%. What we can see from the subsequent 4 years under the fake Tories is that the staff numbers grew every year, as did the overall taxpayer burden. Despite a dip in the average salary in 2021-22, which effectively seems to be an issue that they experienced due to the total funds not really keeping up with the expansion of staff, we can tell that the direction of travel for staff pay is increasing at levels that are far beyond the private sector again. So essentially what we can see here, and that is another organisation set up to reward useful idiots, at least while they're useful. We do have a full year of labour to add to this, where the expansion of staff continues and the expansion of the whole funding situation in general. But once again, you've got that slight dip in the salary, but just purely down to the overall funding not keeping pace with that expansion of staff. If I was going to be trying to look at this from a generous perspective and ignoring everything that I'm about to go into, I suppose I could say that if somebody was going to go, right, like, because if you're dealing with somebody that's got actual proper expertise in dealing with these types of submarines, you might think, well, okay, maybe the higher value of staff pay is actually worth it. But as per usual, and it is seldom the case, and I think we'll be able to demonstrate that similar applies here. So that's what we're going to now start to look at. Right, covering what this office is this time will be a little bit more in depth than normal. I think it's best for you to understand why I'll say that what I generally tend to say about these types of offices, because it does need you to actually comprehend why it is that I reach my conclusions. So we can begin with the basics, whereby this is essentially, I mean, it is kind of an equivalent to a quango, where they're turning around and calling themselves an executive agency. So again, I'll have to kind of demonstrate why. It's also worth noting that this has only existed since 2018. So again, another one of these situations where it's not as if we didn't have submarines before this office existed. You can take a look at the specifics under the who are we part, or who we are rather. You can look at a lot of the sorts of details within that on your own, as in looking at the types of submarines, that is, because there's only 4 of them listed, but effectively I'd rather go to look into showing you the bodies and the industry partners, which I think is a bit more important in terms of understanding. So let's have a look at what we're dealing with. Okay, straight away we've got this DNE and DE and S, both of which I've already covered, where my view was that the DNE part is one that needed to be reformed, and then last week I covered DE and S, which needs to be abolished. So a bit of an issue there, but as of the last count of 2024 to 25, the DNE in particular had a cost burden of 12.5 billion, and they pretty much quite literally do the exact same thing as this agency is pretending to do. DE&S also effectively does a certain portion of it, of what it is that this submarine delivery agency is claiming to do as well. But to add insult to serious taxpayer waste, 3/4 of them are based in the same loony left location of Bristol. So I mean, it's literally the same place. Are they doing double accounting and it's the same people? Well, that we'd have to look at, but either way, doesn't really matter. The only thing about this and that considering there is 3/4 of them based in Bristol, next to an office that does basically the same thing, the words piss and take come to mind. So I'll show the other locations in a short while. So next up, we can have a look at these industry partners, where we do have to have what would be considered possibly a bit of a semantic issue, because these are also listed as organisations within the single source suppliers, which I already covered in episode 179. And so then additionally you've got this Dreadnought Alliance at the bottom, which is not an official organisation as such in terms of being a registered organisation or anything like that. And so you're literally naming the same organisations twice, because the people that make up this organisation include 2 of the single source suppliers and then the agency itself. So it's just pointless putting that. Then if we add to that, all right, hold on a minute. Yeah, you've got these international partners that have to be included, and so we've got we've got organisations rather than that are involving Australia and the US as well as the UK. So this AUKUS thing, and in either instance, whether it be the ones that dealing with the UK, Australia, and US, and the Polaris, which is the US, I don't really see where this SDA organisation fits into the scheme of things, really. So, in terms of the Australian situation, we're looking at work being based off of performance of BAE and Rolls-Royce. And then considering that this Polaris situation goes back to 1963, it's clearly not dependent on an organisation that's been around since 2018. So it's all a bit nonsensy, if I want to make up a new word there. So in terms of these other locations, I don't know if you'll be able to see this properly. It doesn't really matter, and like I say, you can always go to the website and see it for yourself. But in addition to the site of Bristol, you've got 6 more inside the UK, and then one that is termed as several locations across the east coast of the US. There is a bit of care needed in terms of what I consider to be intentional misrepresentation, because in the detail for in the locations of Clyde, Derby, and Devonport, they state people or employees of 6,000, 4,000, and 12,000 respectively. But if we think back to the numbers that I put up at the beginning there, the actual number of employees in this office from the final year of accounts for 2024-25 is 2,751, and 3/4 of these are based in Bristol. So basically that means there's only 688 staff that could be spread amongst these other locations, let alone 22,000 being located in 3 of them. See what I mean? So, like I said, I mean, Again, this could be something where people might suggest that I'm being a little bit too picky, but the unfortunate fact is that too many people are just a little bit too stupid to actually understand these simple kind of situations, and they can be persuaded into the highly dubious methods of presenting information to make them appear bigger than they actually are. I mean, I suppose you could say it's potentially disinformation. So I'm really not keen on what I'm seeing so far. So in terms of what it is that they claim that they're doing, if we look at the first sort of bullet point there, and if you don't understand CASD, an acronym, is it an acronym? I think that's a word. Well, acronym. That, I will be able to speak English one of these days. Anyway, that particular acronym means continuous at sea deterrent. And again, if you look at all of this, and remember from episode 181 that we've got the Defence Nuclear Organisation, which is also then stipulated as enterprise. And then if you add in the fact that the design and the construction of these submarines is not really likely to be handled by a bunch of Costa Coffee rejects in Bristol, I suspect we've got a serious amount of bullshit in terms of what it is that they're claiming to do overall. In the massively unlikely event that they accidentally hired someone that even knows what a submarine is, I dare say shifting people like that wouldn't really be too difficult in terms of putting them inside the DNO, DNE. It's strange how they've got the two names for the same thing, but putting people into that organisation wouldn't prove particularly difficult, and you could get rid of an awful lot of the waste here. But let's have a little bit of a look as well in that, in terms of an overview of who sits at the top of this organisation. So this is the board of directors. And you can pause and make up your own mind here, really, rather than me going into one of my episodes where I go into complete detail of everybody. And whilst I can point to various issues, such as, just from this information on the screen alone, that you've got Claire Hall's relevant experience as a restaurant owner. If you was to look at these yourself, and do you think the focus on submarine delivery might be a bit of a problem? I mean, if anybody wants to try to look at this and shout out, what about that Rear Admiral Donald Doole, or however you pronounce it, CBE, because he's got no other interests. Well, he left in April of 2024. Like I say, this is not literally the most up-to-date. This is from the last annual report that they produced. And then if you look at that Georgina Benzes, there's the other one that doesn't have any additional interests. She has literally got zero experience in any of this as well. And that's why she's the, I think she's a chief financial officer. Chief financial, take your money officer. I think basically in that we can kind of get the picture as normal. I'm not exactly swimming in the worlds of necessity, I don't think. I think, as normally tends to be the case, in that I have to look towards any sort of real world evidence of whether they're, because I mean, as per usual, if you look at their annual reports and that, they're all doing their backslapping and what a wonderful job we're doing. But are they actually performing in the way that they claim that they deserve? Or is it a different story? Well, You probably won't be overly surprised by this, but again, it tends to be a bit of a theme, doesn't it? Right, because it's not really just a case of me looking at stuff and going, I think I might see a bit of a problem here. It is a case of me needing to present information to you as evidence, because it's not as if I'm some sort of an expert in nuclear submarines or anything like that. But Rear Admiral Philip Matthias is an expert in this sort of stuff, and this particular information comes from an article in just the past December, and he literally states that we are no longer capable of running a nuclear submarine program. It's pretty damning to get going, isn't it? He also suggests that we withdraw from this AUKUS program, giving the example that the Astute class took an unprecedented 13 years to complete, the longest ever. He also says that we've got problems that include an inability to reach, so submarines that are managing to finally get through these long production cycles, they can't reach their intended top speeds. They have leaks, which is quite a serious issue on a submarine, really, isn't it? They suffer from corrosion quite swiftly and have various other reliability issues. So, as per usual, we can spot a pattern in terms of so many of the things that I have to keep disclosing about what's going on with the military at the moment. One more. This is literally from this week. Not only is there a problem with failing to perform maintenance and a failure to have sufficient numbers of submarines ready for deployment, what that does mean is that the few operating submarines that they actually have available, they're sending them out for as long as 200 days, which is then leading to the submariners saying, I ain't doing that again. They're quitting. Now, the MOD have sat in front of what is quite clearly a waste of space committee, which is what this article is about. And we know damn well that so-called committee of the MPs and so forth, they'll all sit around, talk about bollocks like this, and then literally do nothing. Because otherwise this sort of stuff wouldn't keep happening. And I'm sure, as per usual, in terms of the guy that's doing the response from the MOD, his part in the farce is to sit there and say, oh no, that was then, and it's our top priority now to do blah blah blah, which they never do. But there is a really quite important point in terms of what the MOD's response was, which is the box that is directly above me and beyond the submarine itself. At no point in terms of their claim of having their top priority to sort this problem out, they do not mention the submarine delivery agency at all. They mention the Defence Nuclear Enterprise, the one that I said that needed review and reform. Kind of confirms to me that at least I was on the right track. Face value, that is. And if you've got these people speaking in these terms, we have to take a bit of credence in that. So once again, we're dealing with something that the MOD is spending large amounts of money on and just feeding useless individuals, basically, that just do not need to be a part of the MOD or linked to the MOD or anything like that. It's not our boys that are involved. The ones that actually do need to understand exactly what it is that's going on here, and people that do actually have some level of expertise in these areas that would be able to then have a competent conversation with the supply side. Like I said, it's just yet another room full of Costa Coffee rejects. So that's all I need to talk about with that one, really, then, isn't it? So, because of the additional money from this agency, we've now gone over the 3 billion mark for the benchmark period, at least. Bears repeating, I will show the full 5 years at the end of doing the MOD. In terms of the policy suggestions, absolutely yes, of course, I would save us £200 million. Why anybody in all of these government offices is dumb enough to not understand how this is literally doubling up nonsense of people that just do not need to be involved is beyond me. But I mean, again, we should not have people that are external to the Navy involved in this. And in general, whether it be Navy, Air Force, Army, there's reasons why we've got a military that's in absolute shit order. So, moving on to a couple of additional parts and a brief update this time in terms of the DVLA situation. I think I informed last week it now sits with the Ombudsman, but the retards at the DVLA decided to send me this stupid nonsense on February the 19th. Arrived here on February the 19th. So, just to be clear, they seem to think that I should pay the car thieves of NSL, then pay them £315, and then pay road tax on top of the car that they've stolen and may not even exist anymore. Retard alert indeed. And so my basic response to the Ombudsman and Tim Moss has been this, and just reminding them that the longer this crap goes on, the more they interfere with me. The cost keeps going up, boys. You keep playing games. And if they want to talk about a legal situation, go ahead, make my day. Right, there's one other thing that I want to talk about now, which is the talk of the town over the last week in particular, because I want to make a few comments about these developments of Restore Britain, but I'm not going to go into the usual sort of stuff that I think everybody else is arguing about. Now, this is the cover screen for an interview that Rupert Lowe gave on the Lotus Eaters with Carl Benjamin, also on February the 19th, so that was yesterday, I think. Yeah, yesterday. And it contained some information that led me to ask questions online which remain unanswered. But it does seem, at least to me, that most people are not really, most people in general that are contacting Restore as a so-called party, they're not really getting much response either. So I think a lot of people are being left hanging at the moment. And I think the basic reason for that is quite simple, in that I don't think they've got enough people to deal with it. Now, you could say that this is a potential problem for having launched a little bit too soon, but I think there's there's a further issue that's going on here, because I'm going to also refer you to the video that I put out on the Moirai Appropriation channel called Local Parties, which I did last December. Because some of the comments that Rupert Lowe made during this interview kind of suggest to me that this is not going to be your standard national party as such. And I'm not entirely sure that they are actually going to launch as a party. So specifically, if you remember from that, or if you haven't, go and check it out. There's a link in the description for it. He does state that his local based party, this Great Yarmouth First, is going to be the model for what this Restore party is going to be doing. And he's also stating that they will not interfere with local matters. So I think that Restore is then going to be doing, as I kind of described in that video, where they're going to be having each seat develop their own party, but just operate under a sort of national framework. And the problem that is going to raise is that if they don't make that clear to the people that are saying that they want to join Restore, they could end up with some issues, to say the least. If he wants to have like this open door partnership with actual parties like Advance UK and UKIP and what have you, I think he's going to really start to piss those people off unnecessarily if he doesn't make this quite clear. And I can't really honestly think of a single legitimate reason why he's not making this clearly known, which by default kind of means that there's a distinct possibility that I'm wrong here. But just from his own words alone and his own explanation, I don't really see how I am. And if I am, then again, we've got this problem of somebody putting out mixed messaging. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a funny one, this. I'm also a little bit cautious about his team of youngsters, which bizarrely enough these days youngster seems to amount to anybody that's basically under 40, which some legitimacy to that possibly. The people that he's working with there includes like your Harrison Pitts and is it Charlie Downs or something like that. But anyway, I think anybody that looks at it and that, you know who these young fellas are. Now, those fellas might be relatively good speakers insofar as the areas that they want to speak about, and they can certainly be sharp enough to annoy all the right people, which is obviously a good thing. But it does have to be stated that there isn't really a single one amongst them that is what could be described as economically competent, and that's going to be a part of the danger that they're going to come about again, because if you combine unclear messaging about how they're actually going to be operating this so-called party, and then further insufficient clarity and a distinct lack of competence relating to economics, you're going to end up with a bit of a situation that, should they get in under those kind of premises, you're going to have a bit of a Mamdani effect that he's discovering very, very quickly out in New York. You can promise all manner of stuff and that until it's actually put in your lap, and things can fall to shit very, very quickly. And obviously in Mamdani's case, and that all that shit is literally all over the floor. But you know, I'm not talking about these people needing to have the kind of detail that somebody like a Pete North keeps whining on about, but which he can't actually deliver himself. But at least some kind of an indication that they know that the current financial system is really not fit for purpose. And they at least have some idea as to what it is that they need to be heading towards. And including who it is that they're going to need to be very, very careful of. They're going to be desperate to try to do a Liz Truss to them. Not that I think that she was particularly good anyway. But if you combine, like I say, if you combine all these things, it's creating much too big a risk. And it needs everybody that is joining up on this list of members to be told exactly what's what. And this continual cycle of our policy is going to be this, our policy is going to be that. It's not real, it's red meat to the masses, and I've got no real complaints about it in terms of what that red meat is. But if you don't understand the economy, oh, you're in trouble. Now, obviously, when he was given his initial information, he was saying things like, I'm going to get proper business people involved, I'm going to get scientists involved, I'm going to get all of the various expertise involved. But you don't have it. That's a problem. You don't have it. And launching in this way prior to the May local elections, again, you've got a bit of an issue, because it's going to be dragging people's attention away from other parties, like an Advance UK in particular, that could probably do with a real leg up over this sort of stuff. Because it's quite clear that Advance UK is just not making the reach through at all. I mean, when the people are trying to attack Rupert Lowe, they're saying, oh, nobody actually knows who he is. Well, we know that that's not true. But when it comes down to Advance UK and Ben Habib, then you are in a situation where most people don't know who he is. If they start losing councils to the likes of the Greens and the Labour and all that sort of stuff, when you've got that English devolution bill that I've mentioned previously coming through, that's going to be a really serious problem. And again, I don't think any of these people know that. I'm trying desperately to put it out there time and time and again. For God's sake, pay attention to this. But I just don't think it's cutting through. I had another example today, really, in that where we've had people complaining about the new cabinet secretary, and it was pointed out that Rupert Lowe has already spoken to her at a select committee once before, and where he questioned why she was known as the Queen of Woke. Now, the problem that none of them seem to understand is that they're looking at her and focusing all of the criticism on her, relatively rightly so. But the problem is, as retarded as she is with a lot of the stuff that she does, she is literally pushing to reach the targets which are mandatory because of our statutory obligations through the IFRS. I've pointed this out a number of times before, and anybody that's not familiar, go back to episode 124, 8 parts talking about the IFRS. And we're talking about the standards for your annual reports and accounts now. and the targets that they want everybody to be obliged to perform are far more based around all of that woke shit than they are about actually doing proper accounting. Nobody seems to know these things. This is going to be a problem. So, I mean, it's yet another situation where we're in this constant cycle of somebody comes forward and says, right, I might be able to solve all of your problems. And from a rhetoric perspective, yeah, all sounds absolutely great. Yeah, wonderful. But the reality of it is that they're going to be banging their heads against things that they didn't even know existed. This is a simple, fundamental problem that we continuously have. I know we get the excuses from the fake Tories, especially the ones that have now gone over to Reform, where they've suddenly come, after being in office for 14 years, and turn around and go, I tried to get things done, but they wouldn't let me. I've never heard a single one of them talk about the IFRS. And yet, as I've demonstrated when I'd actually performed that audit, you had my local MP at the time, that Craig McKinley. He was sat on the Financial Reporting Advisory Board that authorised that. So how do they sit on these boards and talk to each other and not know that it exists? It's ridiculous. And now you've got Craig McKinley, and that's doing his pretend cyborg impressions, sitting in the, oh God, what are they called? Like the Net Zero, the Global Warming Policy Foundation, that's it. He sits with them now, doing absolutely nothing of any value, and pretending that he didn't know anything about, he was against all of this from the get-go. Not very loudly, obviously. It's ridiculous. I don't know. So when you've got these conservative, I mean, Liz Truss, when she's been out complaining yet again, and basically promoting, if you want to know what the problems are, buy my book. It's convenient, isn't it? She talks about the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, and then she talks about the Bank of England, which is then complaining about what they did. I've noticed a fundamental lack of any mention at all about the Bank of England's was it the Facilitation Fund, without which all of your quantitative easing and all of these bonds would never be issued. How do you forget that? If you've come to understand things after the event and you still don't know what it was, probably not really giving us any information of any use, really, are you? But for those that might want to have an understanding, yes, my services are available, and I can actually tell you the stuff that you should actually be understanding. Doubt that that'll happen, and it'll remain another voice in the wilderness situation, but nobody can say that I didn't try. So I think that'll probably wrap it up for this week, actually. I think there's only a few more offices left that were not listed under the MOD that I've got to actually cover, and then I can get into actually doing the proper Army, Navy and Air Force themselves as such, because that will be the bulk of the MOD spending, you'd imagine. So I think that'll do it then. All right, cheers. See you next week. Bye bye.